the G.55S is not OP. I know saying this as I'm showcasing a triple kill and showing you my win rate of over 90% doesn't really back up my statement. But I am actually quite serious about this, and I have the stats to back it up too. But first, some history of the aircraft. Early Italian fighter planes like the MC-202 were built with copies of the German DB601 engine. With the stronger, license-built DB605, more capable aircraft like the G.55 were developed. The first prototype, known as the Sotto Serie Zero, showed very favorable flying characteristics, but a troublesome reloading process for the guns. After fixing the weapon loadout in the Serie Uno, the plane went into mass production. So where does the G.55S come from? Well, the Regia Aeronautica relied heavily upon the Sparviero to destroy naval targets with torpedoes. However, as the war progressed, the medium bomber faced more and more advanced allied fighters, and the Italians looked for a faster platform that could also combat enemy fighters. Fiat initially decided on a new design with the radial engine, the G57. After plans for it fell through, they took a production G55 and modified it to carry a torpedo. These modifications included the addition of a second radiator in order to keep them out of the way of the torpedo, as well as lengthening the tail wheel covered by a small cowling to reduce the drag. As World War II came to an end in Europe, the order was cancelled however, and the single prototype was converted back to Serie Uno and continued service in the post-war Italian Air Force. And that's why this thing is a premium in the first place. But now let's go over some of the in-game characteristics. The Centauro is Italy's currently only premium rank 4 fighter at a battle rating of 4.3. It features 3 German MG151 20mm cannons with 650 rounds total and can also carry a single torpedo which can be dropped below 300 km/h and below 120 meters altitude. The overall flight characteristics are pretty good. It has a good climb rate, is very maneuverable and has both a very low stall speed with landing flaps, as well as a very high rip speed of 850 km/h indicated airspeed and dive. The combat flaps are very tough and can be used up to speeds of 500 km/h, and the aircraft suffers from minimal compression up to around 750 km/h, after which it does start compressing but is still recoverable. The engine does have some hard overheating issues. You can't really use war emergency power for too long, and you have to be smart about it too. This also results in the engine being very weak against oil and water leaks, which with even the slightest leak forcing you to RTB to avoid melting the engine. This aircraft has been absolutely spammed out since patch 1.69 dropped, and allowed many people to research the entire Italian tech tree in a few days. As a result, many people have started to call it overpowered. So let's see the stats then. In fact, let's compare it to the German premium BF19 G2, for 3 reasons. Firstly, of course, it has the same battle rating in realistic mode. Second, people don't really call that thing overpowered, just very good. Thirdly, both aircraft share the exact same engine, so any performance differences will come down to the airframe itself. In terms of acceleration, the G2 is better at every speed, but especially so at the higher ones. This is a result of the rather low top speed of the G.55S. Yes, you can just barely break 500 km/h with war emergency power, but most of the time you'll be fighting in the low to mid 400s. Climb rate is also a win for the G2, even if barely. At 260 km/h indicated airspeed, the G.55S climbs an average of 1.5 meters per second slower than the German cousin. Now energy retention, something I can't quite put to paper, so I made a little test instead. At 1 km altitude, I've accelerated both aircraft and did the vertical loop at 400 km/h. Now whilst the G.55S completed the loop 2.8 seconds earlier, proving that it has a better maneuverability, it also had considerably less speed than the G2 afterwards. This correlates with my overall flying experience in this thing. It doesn't seem to have a particularly great energy retention, especially compared to the American fighters it'll face. Now I've been talking about maneuverability, but how maneuverable is it really? Well, I can tell you from experience that it will outturn anything American out there. And even Russians can struggle keeping up with you in a turn. Spitfires are another story. They will eventually outturn you in a prolonged fight. But with clever use of throttle and flaps you can sometimes surprise them and shoot them down before they get a chance. Do note the very generous rip speed of the combat flaps, as well as the small compression effect. At lower speeds, the Spitfires will definitely outturn you, but at higher speeds, between 400 to 500 km per hour, you might even have the edge. This will require a spiraling descent, however. You don't really have the energy retention to keep up those speeds at a horizontal turn. So what the G.55S is really is a hybrid somewhere in between 109s and Spitfires. It has a very good climb rate and very high dive speed, which make it usable for boom and zooming, while still being maneuverable enough to dogfight. The 3 cannons are mounted close together and are very good for head-ons. And with the 650 rounds total and the torpedo, you can also go for ground attack, clearing landing craft on Norway for example, and evading anyone diving on you. It's a very good all-round aircraft, but it has major exploitable weaknesses. If you are flying a Spitfire for example, you can and will outclimb it. Once you're on the rear of a G.55S, there isn't really much they can do but try to outdive you or force you to compress and turn away. All you need to do is force the dogfight at low speeds and stay on them. The Americans have 2 major advantages: top speed and energy retention. I can't tell you how many times I've been harassed by P-47s that got an air start and that I could never even touch unless they went head on. In case you aren't at your top speed for some reason and there's a G.55S behind you, you might not be able to immediately outdive it, but you will carry the speed out of the dive much better than he will. Generally, you will want to stay higher than them if you can, just to always have the energy advantage. As long as you maintain that energy, they can't ever really touch you. Just for the love of Godzilla, don't go into head-ons. Your 50s might have been buffed, but they're still mounted in the wings in most cases. Those 320mm cannons will outsnipe you. For the Russians, you have pretty similar aircraft actually. They are slightly more maneuverable in one-on-one battles, but you are of course faster in low-level flight. Do a bit of both tactics that the Americans and the Brits have to use. So if the stats are there and the tactics are clear, why are the G.55Ss currently stomping the matchmaker? For one thing, I can tell you from my play experience over the past couple of years that almost any vehicle can ruffle stomp games if it's spammed out enough. The same type of vehicle generally tends to stick together, which creates furballs. And whilst it might be simple enough to employ tactics against a single aircraft, it becomes much harder trying to do that when 3 or more are nearby. Game after game, I've seen groups of 4 to 5 G.55Ss literally piling on single enemies. What's there would just come one at a time, essentially feeding them the kills. Another factor is the novelty. When a new aircraft comes out, people really have no idea what the aircraft can or cannot do, or even how to fight it. Time and time again I've seen P-47s and P-51s trying to turn with this thing, or going into head-ons instead of using their advantages. The Spitfire pilots weren't much better either, going into fights overconfident and getting swarmed. So to summarize, the G.55S is a very good aircraft indeed, but it is not invincible. It could probably do with a battle rating of 4.7 just because of its versatility, but then again it can't really deal with high-tier aircraft as it's simply too slow. I'm guessing that after this video the win rates are probably going to go down since more people will now know how to deal with these things, or we might even see more G.55Ss since I kind of showed how good this thing really can be to grind through the Italian tech tree. Not that that is really too hard. But yeah, my final opinion, I really like the G.55S. It's a very versatile fighter and I like versatility in my fighters. But of course, those are just my experiences and opinions. I am very much interested to hear your opinions in the comment section down below. Do please identify if you are a G.55S owner, if you have flown them yourself, or if you have simply just faced the swarms of them and been getting ruffle stomped every single time. And of course, let me know if these tactics have helped you in fighting with or against this thing. Now before you go, I would just like to mention and actually ask you to go follow me on twitch.tv/MikeGoesBoom. We have been streaming I say a lot more, it's been like 3 times now, but I have been streaming more regularly now. I usually announce it on Discord and not on YouTube, so if you don't want to miss a stream or just want to say hello and play with me, join in there. We might even play some sim mode. Probably not today though, we'll see. Anyways lads, this has been it for the Mamma Mia G.55S review or overall tactics. My name is MikeGoesBoom, but you knew that already, and as always, thank you for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find